Who is the biggest troll in history? I forget the name, but that one guy from the 1800s who bought specific tickets to a play and then gave them away to bald men on the street so that when everyone took their seats and the bald men's heads reflected the light from the stage, they spelled out "duck" as seen from the stage. Theodore Hook, the perpetrator of the Berners Street hoax in London in 1810, in which Cook sent thousands of letters summoning all manners of various vendors and service people and physicians and dignitaries and others to all come to one random person's home, literally shutting down a large part of London as they all descended upon the same address throughout the day, all while Cook and a friend sat watching from a house across the street, presumably laughing their asses off the whole time. This Chinese general, whose city was besieged by a much larger army, so he opened the main gate and sat atop it playing his flute. The enemy thought it was a trap, so they packed their stuff and left. Eric the Red. He wanted people to come and live in his newfound ice-covered land, so he named it Greenland. Hey, I heard Therese this even better place, called Wineland, just a bit further. Teresa Believe to why it was named Wineland Vinland. That's not due to trickery though. When first settled, the climate was very different, much warmer, and had an abundant yield of grapes, therefore the name. I remember reading that during the same time England also had great amount of grapes. But climate changed drastically and the area was forced to be abandoned, and Icelanders had to adapt to living in harsher and colder weather. Now I'm not a scientist and you should do your own research before settling with my explanations though. The peak of the Viking Age coincided with unusually warm temperatures, which is why doing things like settling Greenland and sailing across the iceberg-covered North Atlantic seemed like perfectly reasonable ideas at the time, but then seemed like myths just a couple generations later. It was an unusually warm period followed immediately by an unusually cool period. The Little Ice Age saw temps considerably lower than they are today. Diogenes. He became notorious for his philosophical stunts, such as carrying a lamp during the day, claiming to be looking for an honest man. He criticized Plato, disputed his interpretation of Socrates, and sabotaged his lectures, sometimes distracting listeners by bringing food and eating during the discussions. Diogenes was also noted for having mocked Alexander the Great, both in public and to his face when he visited Corinth in 336 BC. My favorite Diogenes story: Diogenes stood outside a whorehouse yelling insults at the customers for visiting women of ill repute. They began giving him small coins to shut him up. When he collected enough coins, he went in the whorehouse. And once when he saw the son of a whore throwing rocks into a crowd, he said, "Take care you don't hit your father." There was a Prussian, I can't remember his name, who managed to make an officer uniform out of scraps of clothing. He used it to convince a few guards on patrol to follow him into a government building, ordered the arrest of the man in charge, confiscated all the money personally, sent the arrested man to Berlin, claiming it was all on order of the king. He then ditched the uniform, got on a train to Berlin and managed to beat the guards there. He then sat back and watched the absolute confusion happen. The guy was eventually arrested, but the public turned him into a celebrity and his actions into a play that was performed all over Germany. He wasn't incarcerated for long, and after his release he lived an easy life from there on. The Kaiser even was proud for this to happen because it showed how much the people trusted the authorities. The mother ducker who sold the Eiffel Tower, twice. To be honest, his advice seems great for sales. Lustig's 10 Commandments of the Con 1. Be a patient listener, it is this, not fast talking, that gets a conman his coups. 2. Never look bored. 3. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. 4. Let the other person reveal religious views, then have the same ones. 5. Hint at sex talk, but don't follow it up unless the other fellow shows a strong interest. 6. Never discuss illness, unless some special concern is shown. 7. Never pry into a person's personal circumstances, they'll tell you all eventually. 8. Never boast. Just let your importance be quietly obvious. 9. Never be untidy. 10. Never get drunk. Sounds like my therapist is a con artist. Mine isn't. She doesn't follow 7 to 10. Mozart didn't like this singer so much that he wrote a piece for her with high and low notes constantly, because he noticed that when she hit low notes her chin went to her chest, and when she hit high notes her head would fling back. So it was like she was bobbing like a chicken. Classic composers had good sense of humor. Mozart's contemporary Joseph Haydn was conductor under a noble for a long time. But his employer never gave Haydn and his orchestra vacation. So as a sign of protest he made this symphony in which orchestra members leave mid-song section by section. Edit my first silver. Thanks a lot random redditor edit too. Thank you for the gold. Made my gloomy day in Georgia to be bright one. The guy who opened a fake #1 restaurant in London using Google reviews in his back garden and shed with microwave meals. That was incredible. He also faked his way into Paris fashion show as a designer with knockoff clothes. Then whenever people around the world want to interview him about these things, he sends lookalikes instead. It must be quite exhausting knowing him. April Fool's Day 1974 when a man burned 70 rubber tires on a dormant volcano in Alaska. This has to be up there. He waited 3 years to get a helicopter to fly the tires to the top to get a picture-perfect condition. He even got the Coast Guard called out too, and here's the link to the story. Hoaxes.org. Porky's favorite response to the prank came in 1980. He received a letter from an attorney in Denver, inside of which was a clipping from the Denver Post with a photo of Mount St. Helens erupting. Attached was a note that read, "This time, you little bastard, you've gone too far." Amazing. I was thinking more like the mortician who patented the automatic telephone switch 3 years after finding out his rival's wife worked as a telephone operator and would reroute calls asking for his funeral parlor to her husband's. The guy put a whole worldwide workforce out of work for one person's actions. Edit, thank you for the upvotes and awards, you guys are awesome. Spite is a powerful thing. The dude who somehow got a network news program to say that a plane that crashed was piloted by 4 men with the names, Hu Li Fuck Some Ting Wong Wei Tu Lo Bang Ding Ao. Here you go, www.youtube.com watch. Fjukitu. The guy who decided to put an ice troll 34 the way up the path to High Hrothgar. I think it's a great introduction to how you should always be quick saving. I've never even played Skyrim, but I feel this pain. Stephen Hawking was in an interview. When a cord was unplugged, an alarm went off. This was before he was completely immobile, and he slumped in his chair. The people interviewing him were scared out of their minds, until they realized that he was all right and chuckling at his joke. The cord and alarm were for a computer. Stephen Hawking was a surprisingly funny guy. I've heard quite a few stories of him being a troll or making jokes. In his last book, his daughter wrote an anecdote of how he would sometimes drive way too fast with his wheelchair on campus with her on board, scaring people in the pro se. I love the fact that his wheelchair was even set up with the possibility of moving at speeds possible of being deemed way too fast. Sir, Therese, really no reason for the gearing to ever allow for anything in excess of 5 miles per hour. I said 15 miles per hour. I'm pretty certain I didn't stutter when I gave you the requirements. It's all relative. Orson Welles did a radio play that told people the Martians were invading. The next day he told everyone that his play had freaked out millions of people, when it was a few dozen at most. Ironically, the troll wasn't Welles for running the show, but the papers for lying about its impact. Newspapers were terrified of radio and were constantly publishing stories about the evils of this satanic device. Local papers basically invented the story of the Martian panic wholesale, and it was an accepted part of history for decades before it was debunked. All you need to do is listen to the original show. The whole thing is an hour long. It starts off with an announcement of a War of the Worlds Halloween special. The first bit is standard 1920s radio fare, interrupted every now and again by fake reporters talking about a mysterious object that fell from the sky. By the 10-minute mark or so, he moves completely to the reporters discussing the invasion and the military response. 30 minutes in, there's a commercial break where Welles thanks listeners for tuning into his show. When the show picks up again, it's an audio play format where a man narrates himself walking through a devastated city while hiding from Martians. So whatever panic may or may not have happened could not have lasted longer than 15 minutes. Yeah, I bet the accidental nuke warning Hawaii have a couple of years ago actually had the wholesale panic for 15 minutes. I mean, it was an emergency text from the government itself. Michelangelo, without a doubt. This man was hired to paint a chapel and put more dicks and asses on it than you ever did see. Pope, my boy, this is a holy place, please treat it with the utmost respect. Michelangelo, he. Biagio de Cesena, what's with all the butts? This would suit a brothel more than a chapel. Michelangelo, I've taken your criticism on board, and decided I'd paint you. Hope you're okay with people seeing you naked with man tits, donkey ears and your dick being bitten by a snake forever. Mic drop. It gets even better. When Biago complained to the Pope reportedly joked that his jurisdiction did not extend to hell, and that the painting would have to stay.